All right, we have a new game going now, and yeah, that's just a standard hand. Obviously we're min-raising knights. Again, we could consider 45 Skywalker 45s. I like the 45. I think it has a lot of benefits. It's something that requires a lot of discussion. I think it's not worth it to go into in that detail here as Leakfinder, why we'd want a 45 or not. It is something I talk a lot about in my one-on-one sessions for people who are interested in expanding their arsenal of pre-flop tools. It is an interesting tool to have. But obviously min raising is standard, and it's going to be fine. I actually 3-bet this as well. For the same reasons as Queen 3 suited. It actually ends up not playing that differently. I don't really fold suited hands very much because 3-betting them is so profitable. The idea is that post flop we get a lot of fold equity on the flop and turn after 3-betting. And when you have a suited hand, on top of that, sometimes we'll get flush draws. And so we don't even have to bluff, we can semi-bluff. And that makes all those bluff spots strictly more profitable because we're suited. And so even though we have 3-2, it doesn't matter. We're just 3-betting it because it's suited, and it is enough. And I've had very, very solid expectation, 3-bet bluffing, suited hands versus fish. It is a very important tool, I think, to have in your arsenal and to have solid ranges for readless. And I actually think that many people say they don't 3-bet bluff readless, and I actually think that readless is one of the most profitable times for 3-bet bluffing. And so I do encourage you to explore this possibility. Talk to your coach about how you can incorporate 3-bet bluffing, when it's useful, and whether, how you can look at it readless and what your readless strategies can be for post-flop play after 3-bet, because that's obviously going to be an important thing. I have found through population models that you don't get enough folds pre-flop to make the 3-bet profitable. That's not why it's profitable. It's the post-flop possibilities. It's the fact that you can be bluffing in a lot of spots depending on your sizing. There are a lot of very profitable spots post-flop, and that can make it very, very profitable compared to folding. But again, it's going to rely on post-flop stuff, and so it is something that, if you're going to start doing it, you should sort of know what you're doing, and you should look for advice and try to figure out what profitable lines are to take post-flop once you've 3-bet a hand like 3-2 suited. Because you can't just be fit fold. Getting flush draws isn't enough. The idea is the flush draws help because you'll always have them some percent of the time, but you're still going to need to be able to take profitable bluff lines. All right, here we're just min-raising King Jack. This is a fold versus a 3-bet shove at this depth. Again, villains tend to not 3-bet shove that much. We can fold King Jack. King Queen is really on the border. It depends a little bit on your perception of the population. The more you think that the population tends to spew 3-bet shoves occasionally, that's when we would be calling King Queen off. But versus most players, I think we can comfortably probably fold King Queen off. It's close though, and certainly we can fold King Jack off. We shouldn't be folding King Jack suited or King Queen suited. Those hands will have too solid equity versus the non-spew hands as well, and it will just end up with enough pot odds. So here we flop top pair. It's a great spot. I agree with the sizing. I think 40 is fine. We do have top pair. We want to get value. At the same time, we don't want to discourage action. I do think a bigger bet here does discourage action. It does look like we're protecting. This is kind of a scary board for a number of hands. We don't want villain to get scared with his draws. We want him to play them aggressively. We want him to get it in here with 10-9 off. So this is fine. Now things get a little bit complicated. So we still have a huge hand. I mean, we're not looking to fold. If we bet, it's a bet call. But notice that, versus some players, this can be a decent spot to check back. There are players who won't give very much action on a 3-flush board. I find the population in general tends to be a little tight when the third flush card hits. Obviously, we'll still get value from some flush draws, but there aren't as many because we have one. And the fact that we have the nut flush draw means that we're not too worried about rivers. Rivers are still going to be profitable for us. Every river essentially is profitable. So I think there is some merit to considering checking back to slow play our hand. But I think we would really need reads that villain will be aggressive on rivers, will be willing to bluff, will be willing to get it in light sometimes on rivers. Readless, I think this is just an opportunity to make another value bet. Readless villains tend to be on the passive side. They still call down with lots of draws and stuff. We should just get value in the spot. And so I would be value betting here. I would probably value bet something around 90. We should bet a little bit more than half pot because we do want to be able to shove the river for a pot size bet. And so I would probably bet again 90, 99, less than 100. Again, for the same reason I talked about in the previous game that we saw, that, I strongly believe that there's a reason stores sell candy bars for 99 cents. And we should try to use that when we can read list to extract more value for our opponents. So yeah, this is definitely too small of a bet. We should just try to get more value. It's just, villain isn't going to be that reliant, isn't going to be responding that much to our sizing. I really don't think we're going to get less value betting 70 than 90. I think we might get less value if we bet over 100. I think that's when it starts looking like a big size, and we might scare him off of a hand like a naked 9 that maybe would have floated another street. But I don't think that 70 is really going to get that much more action. And what it does is that stacks up terribly for the river. We're not going to be able to shove rivers, even on diamonds. We're going to be overpot shoving. It's going to be a gross spot on rivers. It's going to be hard to get max value. And so if we bet a little bit bigger on the turn, we'll be able to size the river better. Right, that's standard. Certainly opening king 2. I'm opening 6-3, so I'm not folding king 2, that's for sure. It's fine. Open up the 8-9. Versus some players we could limp it, but not versus this player. So far he's been very tight. We should just be looking to min-raise a lot. That's a fold. Although versus a reg, I think that is probably a call. Most regs will just be shoving bottom pocket pairs this depth. I think we can exploit them, and I think 10-9 off is a call. I'm just kind of running the math in my head. Yeah, we are, I think, slightly ahead, and we certainly have equity to call it off. Certainly 10-9 suited is always a call of an open shove deep versus a reg. 10-9 off, I think we can still call it off. It's a little closer. But certainly, that's a reg and not someone who's showing 2 stars at the hundreds. This is a fish that we're playing against. So yeah, it's a clear fold. 4-2, this is pretty close. I would min-raise it as well because we've seen him a little bit on the tight side pre. I think that there are other options for it. I do think that folding this one's okay. I'm not a big fan of folding pre, but if you're going to fold anything, it's stuff like 4-2, 7-2, 3-2, that kind of junk. We could limp it, though. I think that there are a decent amount of players where we can limp it and get fold equity post-flop. That is a decent play. Again, it's something that is going to involve having a good game plan post-flop. It's not something that you can just, by default limp, it's going to be profitable. You need to have a game plan post. So again, it's something to talk about with your study group or your coach and figure out, why would Coffeeyay say to limp 4-2 off? What good can come of that? Mercenary told me to limp only middling hands. Why would Coffeeyay say limp 4-2? It's something for you to work out. Again, I found it to be decently profitable. And a good adjustment versus some players where min-raising's not going to be good. But versus this guy, we know min-raising's good. He's been playing so far 50% VPIP. That's actually slightly less than the population average. We expect him to be a little bit tighter than average. He's showing 2 stars, so he's going to be bad post as well. I think this is definitely a min-raise fold pre. Well played. Fine. Again, 10-2. If we're opening 4-2, we're certainly opening 10-2. And I think 10-2 should be an open for everyone. I really think that if by default you're folding 10-2 off, you really could be opening it. And, you shouldn't be so scared of playing pots in position, especially versus fish. If you're folding this versus fish, that's a clear leak that you can fix. You're playing too few hands if you're folding 10-2 off versus a fish. 5, fine. Yep, we can still min-raise kings. We're not so shallow that we'd want to limp it. Yeah, I don't like this check back at all. I understand that, the reason I think this hundreds reg check back is to sort of bluff catch on later streets. He thought, okay, the ace is on the board. It's going to be hard to get a lot of value. A lot of people fold on ace high boards. Let's turn it into a bluff catch. I really think we're losing value by doing that. There's so many hands that call on this flop. There's not that many hands that raise. There's not even that many bluffs or semi-bluffs that raise because it can be hard to get credit on ace-high boards. Even fish sort of know that. Ace-high boards are scary. So what we do when we bet is we get a lot of value from hands that flat us. He's going to be flatting us with 9s and 7s. I mean, he's not folding a pair here. And there's so many draws. I mean, if you start thinking of all the different combos of draws, especially if you throw in all the gut shots, things like Jack 10, even 5-6 is a hand that quite possibly is in villain's range, especially 5-6 suited. Throw in, of course, the open-ended straight draw, 6-8, 10-8, obviously in villain's range, and all the flush draws. And it's just, we're clearly missing value by not betting here. I think this can be a clever play sometimes for some players, but we need reads. We need reads that villain probes a lot or is going to go crazy because we check back on this board or something like that. I think there are some times to do that, or we know that villain's very, very tight and it's just going to be folding so many hands. But overall, I mean, this is just a clear spot where we lost value by checking back. And certainly, at this point, we should probably just call. We are trying to bluff catch. Even so, I think there probably is some value to making a small raise on the turn. The benefit, again, is just for value. It's going to be hard to get value otherwise. Obviously, the big disadvantage is that we discourage bluffs on later streets. By flatting here, I think we probably get another street of a bluff from some hands, some draws that miss. And possibly even a street of value from a 9-8-7 type hand. So I think probably calling is slightly better because we're still going to be able to get value on the river. But I do think that there's a good amount of value in raising turn. It's going to be quite close. If I would raise turn, I'd probably raise it like 120, get an extra 80 chips of value. But as played, we're going to be able to get some value on the river anyways, and we should bet here for sure. Checking back here is really going to be not good. There's so many hands we beat now in villain's range. We don't credibly rep an ace in villain's eyes, I think, so I don't think we need to be worried about the ace. I think the ace is a perfect card for us because villain is going to likely call us with his 9s, 8s, 7s that are certainly in his range at this point. And so we should be looking to value bet. Again, since we are value betting, we do want him to call it off with a 9-8-7. I think this is a pretty close spot, though, in terms of sizing. I think there's a lot of possible sizings that work well. It's just an issue of, what is he going to fold a 7 or 8 to? I think we could probably pot it here. I think that's probably going to be best, making quite a big bet, betting 160, to try to get him to bluff catch. I think because his range is so bluff catcher heavy, we should just try to make the most out of that. And I really think that if we bet 160, he's still going to bluff catch us with a 7. It doesn't look like, it looks kind of like we're spewing. I think a lot of fish do perceive sometimes big bets to be more likely to be bluffs. And I think that this is the kind of spot where he's likely going to put us on a bluff. And so if he's kind of thinking in his mind, we're either bluffing or we're not, things that set off that bluff trigger are good things because we get more calls. And it's not like the fish is going to start computing pot odds and be like, I think he's bluffing, but suddenly I need to be correct 33% of the time because he's potting it. Yeah, I'm just going to fold, And if we had bet half pot, he's going to be like, look, the odds are really good for calling now. I'm going to bluff catch, even though I think his range is strong because he's half pot betting. I'm going to bluff catch because I don't have to be right that often. Try to get away from that kind of mentality. The fish is not you. You shouldn't use your own skills as a poker player and put them on the fish. I really think that a lot of players in this recreational players situation will be treating it as, I'm either calling or folding. And, he's either bluffing or he's not. These kind of binary things, and they're not going to look too much at the sizing. They might look at it, obviously, if we shove. There are going to be warning signs that go off in his head. If he shoves, that's his whole tournament life at risk. But I really think that potting here is likely going to be best because we won't get that many fewer folds, but we do get a lot more value from it. So I would pot it here. If I'm not potting it, I would probably bet something like 99. Again, try to sell that candy bar. But I think that 80 is too small. All right, that's obviously snap call and fun. Hopefully we don't get sucked out. Oh no. Well, that's not as fun anymore. All right, King 9, yes, certainly min raising. It is a min raise fold. Obviously, we're not folding any hand to that min 3 bet at this step, so that's fine. And we should raise here. Again, we're going to start getting into issues of, what's our optimal sizing. I really like to be very exploitive in these spots. And, the things I start thinking about are, what kind of hands is villain going to fold to my raise, depending on what size it is. And so I oftentimes think that in this kind of spot, we can just shove with top pair. Because there's a flush draw on the board, there is a straight draw on the board, not only is villain likely not going to fold those hands to a shove, he's also going to be much more likely to put us on those hands when we shove, and so less likely to fold an 8. I honestly don't think many villains will fold an 8 here if we shove. So the only hands that we start getting into a little bit of a close issue with are hands like ace-king, ace-queen. It's really hard to put villain on a pre-flop range because he min 3-bet. I tend to just put him on a little bit of a tighter flatting range. I think there will still be stuff like Jack-10, Queen-Jack in his range. And, from hands like Queen-Jack, King-Queen, Ace-Jack, Ace-10, those are the kind of hands that we could consider raising not all-in to try to keep in. But it's not like they're going to give us that much value on later streets anyways. Unless they hit, at which point, we're behind. So I think this is a spot where we could just shove. If we're not shoving, then, we could consider inducing as well. If we have reads that villain will, spaz over small bets, we could, for instance, click it back here, min raise, make it 80, and hope that he shoves over us. I think there are some players where we can do that, but we would need reads. And so far, our villain's been kind of on the tight side, hasn't really been that aggro. I don't think he's going to be that aggro in later streets, and so I think I would just shove. I think it's unlikely that by flatting we'll induce bluffs. I think it's unlikely that by raising not all in we'll induce bluffs either. I think the only benefit here to raising not all in is that we get a little bit of a wider range in the form of some hands like Queen-Jack, King-Queen, Ace-King. But again, those hands are going to do fairly, are going to have equity. So folding them out isn't such a bad thing. And also, they're not going to really give us much more value on later streets unless they hit, at which point we're behind. And, obviously the benefit to shoving here is that we get more value out of his 9x, more value out of his 8x, more value out of all of his straight draws and flush draws. And so I think that, we don't get enough value from his flats to justify not all in raise. I think we can just shove here because he's a fish. I think that versus most competent players, we probably shouldn't be shoving here too much. I think we could look to induce 3-bets. But versus this guy, I think we should just shove. I definitely think this is too small. But, we did induce something. We should just shove over at this point for value. I really don't like that flat there. I really think that there's so many hands that are behind that are calling our shove at this point. And, that might not be getting it in on later streets. Like, we're not 100% sure he's going to get it in with flush draws and straight draws on later streets. He probably is, but it's going to be harder for him. I think there are going to be some bad turns, some turns that shut down our action, make life hard for us. Obviously, this is a great turn, but I think we should just shove over his small 3-bet and, be happy that we induced it in the first place and just try to get max value. I don't think there's any way he folds an 8 or a 3 even that did that. He's not folding any of the value part of his range. And we have top pair with a good kicker. At this depth, we should just get it in. But as played, this is, obviously we just snap call it off here. And he does have aces. And obviously that is a part of his range. We know we do have to assign that as part of range, but we have to think of what else is in villain's range. And, obviously aces, it's not like we're planning on folding turns anyways. And so the only benefit to flatting his 3-bet is, villain will bluff on future streets. I really don't think villains bluff that much in general. And our, if we induced a bluff of a 3-bet, I don't think he's going to bluff that often on turns. But, it's hard to say. It depends on your specific population. If you really think that your population tends to, once they've bluffed once, they'll bluff on a later street, then I think it'd be okay. So it's a pretty close spot. I wouldn't worry about aces. I don't think flatting the turn because you're worried of a strong range makes much sense. If you think he has a decent amount of value, we should just get it in because we're ahead of a lot of value on that flop. The only reason to be careful in this kind of spot is if you had a read in the first place that villain tends to min 3-bet a lot of really strong hands. But at that point, we shouldn't be raising his flop bet in the first place. We don't get very much value raising it. We can flat it and try to keep his range wider in the first place. So, but yeah, it is a pretty gross spot when villain does 3-bet to 140. I can kind of see why our hero maybe elected to flat, like because he was so worried about a range. I do think that those non-all-in small 3-bets do tend to be on the nutted side. But again, I think that because of the sizing we use, we do induce some, and there are a lot of draws. I think we should still be getting in on the flop. But again, I would probably just shove over the first rate bet, donk bet, or the continuation bet in the first place. This is a call versus the population. Again, it's something, if you're wondering what kind of a calling range we should have in this spot, it is, readless especially. It's going to be something that depends, entirely on your population. That being said, I think most populations tend to be similar. The population database analysis that I did in my Math and Heads Up Sit and Go series was done on the hundreds, Hyper Turbos and Poker Stars. But from what I found, it's not that different, depending on population. And in that series, I found the optimal shoving ranges. So I did sort of half of it, and I showed how to find the calling ranges if you were interested. And so if you are interested in, having better calling ranges versus the population, I do encourage you to go through the videos in that Math and Heads Up Sit and Go's video pack that relate to the population tendencies and then solving push fold. And you'll be able to get very good ranges out of that, very good accurate readless calling ranges out of that if you go through the work yourself. And this is an open shove. There's no other real way to play it, unless you have very good reads that villain is very inducible and never flats. It's too bad. This is another open shove. Fine. Oh, nice. We finally win one.